Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell. Yeah. That's right. We are here live for the March 23rd, 2025 episode of the Boxing Source Podcast. I am checking in. That's right. The host, J.R. Bell, is here with you live. We have a number of things here that we're going to be talking about in this particular episode. We had a lot of action there. And you know what? You'll definitely wanted to talk about what happened over in Las Vegas, what happened over in California, and of course, what happened in Australia. You know what I mean? So we're going to, basically try to catch up with everything there and get you up to speed as to what went down in each of these events and things like that. I mean, once again, big thanks for everyone that's able to join in live, or if you're able to be catching the replay, you catch the replay there, whether it's in podcast form, or, audio form, things like that. There, through Spotify, through iHeart, through Amazon Podcasts, among many other things here. When it comes to that. So that's what we got, here on the docket. Of course, I've been at many events here over the past 6 weeks plus. So this time, pretty much been chilling out and things like that, as far as like, going to some events, and probably will kind of take it easy there a little bit when it comes to attending a number of these events, right? But for the time being, at least we had a lot of things going on within boxing over the past weekend, and we're going to be talking about it here. Wanted to first go over what happened in Las Vegas, as you had the unified titles there at 154 pounds on the line in the main event, with the WBC and WBO super welterweight titles on the line, as Sebastian Fundora took on Cordell Booker. With Fundora having the first defense of those WBC and WBO belts, going up against Cordell Booker, who was there to fight for the world titles for the first time in his professional career. He only had the lone loss to Austin Ammo Williams back some time ago, some years ago, and had a streak of wins since. And this for Fundora, as I mentioned, was the first defense of those world titles after he won it by decision over Tim Tszyu on March 30th of last year in Las Vegas, right? Of course, all know about it. It was an absolute bloodbath and everything like that. And at that time, we were going to see if Sebastian Fundora was going to get right back at it and have the first defense of those titles in 2024. But it didn't necessarily work out that way. So he ended up having to sit out, basically on the shelf, so to speak, there until March 22nd, almost a full calendar year since his last fight. Now, him going up against Cordell Booker, Booker was in there as, one of those contenders that you would have in the 154-pound division. And I would say, like, at the time, they probably had him, what it was, like, position around, I'm going to see if I can confirm it, right? They had him, around that position of around, I would say, number 8 or something like that. Let me go ahead and confirm it there as far as like WBC. But no, they had him at number 13 in the WBC, but they had him at number 5 in the WBO. So you had the defense there for Sebastian Fundora against a fighter there in Cordell Booker that was as high as number 5 in the WBO. Okay. So with that being said, you have that going on. And with that being also said, that we wanted to see what Sebastian Fundora could do at this particular point, so far, as he was getting in there to defend those titles. Now, I had talked with both of these fighters in the conference call for this event. Cordell Booker was looking at this as, one of those opportunities that he could have that, really doesn't come along very often there for a number of fighters. So he wanted to see if he could make the best of it. But on the flip side with Sebastian Fundora was like, hey, listen, I mean, this is my first offense to these titles, but also this is something where I could show that I could be viewed as the top rated fighter in the 154-pound division. Yes, there's been a lot of activity there at 154. We've, seen what Virgil Ortiz Jr. has done at 154. We had the fight last year there with Terrence Crawford over Israel Madrimov, right? We had the thing there, of course, with Bakr Murtazaliev getting the win over Tim Tszyu, and he is an IBF champion. So that, shows what is going on at the top of the division. You also have, other contenders out there at 154, including one that was part of this card at the Mandalay Bay Event Center in Las Vegas. That we'll talk about here a little bit later. But with Sebastian Fundora, he wanted to, go ahead and get in the ring. As I mentioned, he had been inactive for almost 12 months, pretty much a week away from 12 months, right? So him going up against Cordell Booker, defending those titles, wanted to get in there and see if he could execute. And we wanted to see if he, had more of what he was doing against Tim Tszyu that he could do here against Cordell Booker. And that is basically what he did. He went ahead and he just executed very well there against Cordell Booker, man. And I'm like, oof. It was just not a good look there for Cordell Booker. Yes, he was able to land a couple of hooks, try to get to the inside, have somewhat of a high guard or whatever it is. And then, once he got in range, tried to land a hook, almost similar to, maybe what Brian Mendoza did to knock down and get the knockout victory over Sebastian Fundora some time back. But with Booker, he just didn't necessarily have what it had as far as like what it took for the power to really have Sebastian Fundora be off of his game. And so in those first couple of rounds, you've seen Sebastian Fundora there at 6'5", with the reach that he has, was able to utilize the jab early and often. He was, very active with the jab. And this is like the Sebastian Fundora that, maybe a number of people expecting him to be while he was going up in the rankings at 154 pounds before he had the loss to Brian Mendoza. Is a guy that, would kind of like build off the jab and then work from that instead of, just throwing a couple punches here and there and then try to get to the inside and wear down his opponents. Now, that particular strategy had worked for Sebastian Fundora against the opponents up to the point that he lost to Brian Mendoza, including Brian Mendoza, because he was winning that fight against Mendoza. He just got caught there in the 7th round of that bout. But, for what he did there against Tim Tszyu, he went from having that particular style of trying to get up close and throwing punches up close, hooks and uppercuts and wearing down his opponents, to eventually utilizing the jab and keep being consistent with the jab. Of course, with him being at 6'5.5" and being a southpaw, that's something there that a number of these opponents there would have to, deal with the right jab, continuously having the right jab in your face, jab to the body, and all that type of stuff. And then, once the opponent kind of like try to get away from that or try to get closer within range, then you could use that left hand as far as like throwing hooks, throwing uppercuts, and things like that to continue to wear down your opponent. And that's what we saw here with Sebastian Fundora. I thought this was one of the better performances that he's had in a while. I kind of like put this in comparison to, maybe his fight against Jorge Cota, or I would say also Nathaniel Gallimore. And that was like back in 2020 when that fight happened at the Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles there. I mean, he, just out-hustled Nathaniel Gallimore in that bout and then just wore him down in order to get, a, quick KO victory in that joint, right? Cota was pretty much the same way. He was trying to do that against Sergio Garcia, but it ended up being a little bit more troubling for him in that particular bout. But then the bout against Erickson Lubin in 2022, like I said, that was Fight of the Year candidate, if not Fight of the Year, where both of those guys like really, really dug down and competed in that one. But he was able to get through that, get his victory there. But he has been one of those guys that kind of like stood out at the 154-pound division, outside of course, Jermell Charlo, who became the undisputed champion at 154 with his win over Brian Carlos Castaño in 2022. So outside of that, you had, Sebastian Fundora, you had Tim Tszyu, you had, as I said, Brian Mendoza among those other competitors at the time there. But once Fundora got to the instance where he did lose to Brian Mendoza, then they tried to see if he could get him right back in the ring. They had him originally scheduled for a bout on that card on March 30th of last year. I think it was supposed to be against Sergey Bohachuk. Yeah, against Sergey Bohachuk. But then with Tim Tszyu having to have a replacement opponent of sorts, because he was supposed to be fighting Keith Thurman on that date. Keith Thurman got injured, so they moved up Sebastian Fundora to the main event for him to face Tim Tszyu. And that was going to be at the time for the WBO super welterweight title, but then they added the WBC super welterweight title on there as well because of the inactivity of Jermell Charlo. So you had two belts on the line there last year, and Fundora was able to work his way there for a split decision win. And now this was his, latest bout since then. We all know the story about him potentially fighting Terrence Crawford or him potentially fighting Errol Spence Jr. Just didn't necessarily work out that way. You feel me? So this is, what we had here for Sebastian Fundora. As long as he was able to get a fight, that was the key thing for him to get in the ring, get a fight, be active, and as they say, sometimes get the rust off there for Sebastian Fundora, right? So he was able to do that here against Cordell Booker and executed everything that he needed to do. Cordell Booker really didn't have much of anything to, kind of like keep him at bay or, keep the pressure off of him. And so, there by the fourth round, you had, his overwhelming attack that put Cordell Booker down there within 1 minute or so left in that fourth round. And then before the end of the fourth round happened, that's when you see, more of the attack there from Sebastian Fundora that forced referee there, Thomas Taylor, to stop the bout before pretty much 10 seconds before the end of the fourth round for Sebastian Fundora to get that win by TKO. He is now at 22 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. Cordell Booker suffers the second loss of his professional career, second stoppage loss also there for Cordell Booker. But for Sebastian Fundora, this kind of gets him there in the win column, has him moving forward as the WBC and WBO champion. Now, the thing is, after the fight, you had him talking about potential opponents out there. Bakram Murtazaliev as the IBF champion. The WBA situation, I mean, Terrence Crawford has the WBA title at 154 pounds, but we all know what his intentions are. It ain't fighting Sebastian Fundora. It ain't fighting anybody else there at 154. So with that being said, hey, you know what? You ain't going to have Terrence Crawford being the WBA champion that much longer. So you only have a couple of other things here left that is out for Sebastian Fundora, except for one option, and that is the WBO mandatory challenger, basically going to be announced as a mandatory challenger in Xander Zayas. Now, before I go more into that, I have a great guest that's coming on here with me to talk about these events that happened on Saturday. Of course, is the host of Brunch Boxing. He is, he's a little bit disappointed in a certain person because he sent a person out to be a member of the media for one of those events that happened yesterday, and they didn't quite execute. But at least it's not Mike, because Mike did his job. But we got the host here of Brunch Boxing with us, in brother Matt. Matt is on here with us to talk about these events that happened yesterday. Like I said, I was talking about the main event here in Las Vegas at the Mandalay Bay Event Center that Mike from Brunch Boxing was able to attend. Just wanted to get your thoughts on Sebastian Fundora's performance against Cordell Booker and his perspectives there in the 154-pound division.
To be honest with you, I think Sebastian Fundora looks sharp, very, very sharp. People are gonna talk about Cordell Booker, and I understand that because a lot of people didn't really want to see this fight. But I don't think Cordell Booker performed badly. I just think that Sebastian Fundora was extra sharp. I could see the game plan that Cordell Booker was trying to implement. He was trying to get in and get out real quick, get in, get out, tap, 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 get out, tap, 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 get out. But Fundora was just sharp with the straight punches. When Booker would try to move to the outside, he would like do like a little sweeping kind of hook to get him, and then when Booker would get in close, he'll throw the uppercut, and that's basically what ended the fight. So I thought he was very, very good. I thought it was a great performance, and I hope that Sebastian Fundora gets back in the ring right away, June at the latest. Let's get right back out there, man.
I mean, they could push for June. My perspective is it's going to end up being July. But they should go ahead and have it by the end of June. I don't see why it can't be, at that particular month. Of course, as I mentioned before you got on that, the WBO is looking to have the order of Xander Zayas be the mandatory challenger for Sebastian Fundora, and he was in attendance at that venue there and stepped in the ring basically there to meet up with Sebastian Fundora. So it looks like that fight's going to be next. It's just when is that fight going to take place? And I feel like it shouldn't be that hard to get a deal done for him. So for me, it's just about, okay, where's the fight going to be? And once they get that
Yeah,
locked down,
but here's why it may be difficult for them to get it done,
mm,
because you're talking about July. The ESPN contract is running out around that same time, so maybe it's going to overlap or they're getting close to it. Maybe PBC wants to put that fight on their platform. There's like a
mhm.
lot of logistics, but I think the fight's going to happen next unless Fundora could get like a fight against a Jermell Charlo or a Errol Spence. I don't see no reason why he's not going to fight Xander Zayas next. And I did find it interesting that obviously they allowed him in the ring. They
Yeah.
didn't have to allow him in the ring. They allowed him in the ring.
Hmm.
So that tells me that they are trying to work together to make this fight. And I'm hoping that they do a Puerto Rican weekend in New York.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you've had those hopes, but as I had been, in contact with, one of the sources there for the side of Xander Zayas, they aren't really, up for having him fight on that particular weekend. But the thing is too, this is almost a similar situation to where you had Sandor Martin, who was at the time under contract with Top Rank and still was able to get a fight with the WBC champion at 140 pounds there, and was able to get that right with Alberto Puello. So if they could do that and have that be under a TGB or PBC banner, then they could do the same thing here with Xander Zayas and have that as a one off, because Sebastian has been part of main events and been involved in the pay per view. So it would make much sense to try to see if they could work it out under some other atmosphere. But it would be interesting if they could try to do like a Fundora versus Xander Zayas at the Barclays Center or something. I mean that could be
Yeah,
possible.
I like that idea. I like that. Like, to me, it has to be in New York. It has to be in New York because I think Xander Zayas can attract more people in New York than Sebastian Fundora can attract on the West Coast.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a big deal. Them Puerto Ricans will come out for Xander Zayas. I think, and I think if PBC TGB is part of the promotion there, Man, we know they know what they're doing in New York. We saw it,
Hmm.
firsthand at that
Hmm.
tank event. So I think it's perfect synergy. I really need to see a parade weekend though. They like cool like they gotta get it done parade weekend because how can you not have a Puerto Rican event for parade weekend if you have a guy who is decently popular in the area who's challenging for his first world title against a name opponent? Like it just makes too much sense.
Yeah, and if I'm like trying to check, here on the actual date there, and yeah, I'll say this: Saturday, June 7th is open over at the Barclays Center. So hey, I don't know, I might have to hit up my source and say, hey, look, man,
Because
Saturday,
look,
June
hey,
7th, let's do it.
yeah, and look at it this way. We saw the fight yesterday. Fundora ain't take punishment, so why can't he come back early June? Like,
Yeah,
I think he could come back right away.
yeah, he could come back right away. I mean, listen, I mean, he could be as active as possible. You had a fighter that was part of that card that got back in the ring within about 6 or 7 weeks of his last fight. So I don't see why Sebastian Fundora can't do it. You know,
Yeah,
so
absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a very good fight. I'll favor Pandora, obviously. I don't think Zaya's got anything for him, but I think it'll be a good crowd, good exciting fight, and they can
mhm.
build that into something. They could build that into a really nice card.
Yeah, they could, they could do that. It's just something where maybe it's PBC or like I said with TGB Promotions, they'll be able to get the fighters that'll fit into that card to make it pretty good. And hey, it doesn't necessarily have to be too big. That could be something for another Amazon, Amazon Prime, PBC on Amazon Prime. So I don't see how they can't do it. You know. So that's good on that front. And like I was mentioning there with the co-featured bout, you did have there with another fighter that is at 154 pounds or competing at 154 pounds, and Jesus Ramos Jr. That was going up against Guido Emmanuel Schramm there in the co-feature bout. And the thing with that was, uh, Jesus Ramos had, just got back in the ring, after facing Jason Rosario on February 1st, right? And after that, he was like saying, "Hey, I want to get back active," because he only had the one fight against back in May of last year, and then after that, he really didn't have a fight for the rest of that year. So he was definitely eager to get back in the ring after his bout against Jason Rosario. And here he had the bout against Guido Emmanuel Strom. He was originally supposed to be fighting Kevin Salgado, but Salgado was, like had been withdrawn from the fight. So they put in Emmanuel Strom, and well, hey, Jesus Ramos Jr. did very well there, put punches together very well and everything like that, and was able to get the stoppage victory in that there. So it looks like he wants to get right back in the mix there because he really take that much damage in this bout against Guido Strom. So I could see Jesus Ramos in the mix for another fight here later on down the line. Hey, maybe you could put him on that June card that we were proposing. So I don't see why he can't get back there in June.
Yeah, yeah. I think you have to get Jesus Ramos back in there right away. Right away. And I think that Jesus Ramos should be on every Fundora card until they fight each other. Like I think that's what you do. You have them on the same card. Like you said, that Zaya's card, have them on the same card, and if they both come through with the fights, then you can make that fight. You,
Yeah.
you I I think that's what they they need.
I'm letting them try to cook here with the
Like,
with the earpads or whatever it is. Hold on, I'm gonna see something here. It looked like he had cut off here for a bit, and then I'm gonna just add him back on here. Let me check that. So you're back with us. Looks like you're back with us on here. So yeah, we'll talk about the thing there with Jesus.
Can you hear me?
Barely, we could barely hear you now.
You know what? Let me God man.
Yeah, you might have to, do a little bit of an alternative there on that joint. But like I was saying with Jesus Ramos, he's been very active, trying to stay active there in the 154-pound division. I had a conversation with him, a couple of conversations with him before his fight that he had against Jason Rosario in Las Vegas on February 1st. And there he was like, eager to get, back in the ring. He had his camp. There was Abel Ramos, and once he got in the ring there with Jason Rosario, he was able to, do what he needed to do in order to stop Jason Rosario. Then went back here and got the win over Guido Manuel Strom to have another stoppage victory. So he's looking like he's ready to go as far as like trying to contend for those titles at 154 pounds. You got Matt back with us.
Am I back? Am I back? Am I back? Okay,
Yep.
yeah, it was StreamYard. But yeah, what I was saying is that I think Bravo should tell whatever Fundora's doing. Be on every Fundora card until they can fight each other, because I think that that's a good matchup down the line. I want to see Ramos try to mix it up with the other guys that PBC has at 154, or maybe he can go back and forth between 154 and 160 until he could land a Fundora fight. Or who knows? We know Jermell Charlo's coming back soon. Maybe Charlo versus Ramos is a fight that they want to set up. There's a lot of interesting things that I think that they can do with Jesus Ramos going forward.
Yeah, that's true. And then also, I mean, something that's been hinted out that maybe they could have Jesus Ramos on a card over in Arizona. Maybe you could do that. You know what I mean? So that could also be a possibility there for them to do.
Yeah. I say, yeah, give him a chance. See if he can headline a small venue. Let's see what Jesus. Let's see what we have here. Maybe have the whole Ramos family, Jesus and Abel Ramos, on the same card. And maybe you could do a rematch between Abel Ramos and Mario Barrios there or something like that, because that was a good fight on the Jake Paul Mike Tyson undercard. And just see what you guys could do with the local talent out there in Arizona. Elijah Garcia's from Arizona too, so that's another guy that you could put in the card. You could build a whole card of those Arizona guys that PBC has currently.
I mean, I think it could be like the Desert Diamond Arena in Glendale, Arizona. They could have something like that. Maybe that could happen too. Yeah, you said, Giorgio here in the live chat says, hey, Ramos versus Tejas or Ramos versus Charlotte would be fun. Yeah, we're only talking about, TGB or PBC fights. You know what I mean? So that would be a good on that front. Therefore, Jesus Ramos Jr. I would like that. And yep, you do have Benavidez there from Arizona too. So hey, maybe if you have the whole thing happening with the top of the light heavyweight division, you could have Benavidez there against a Callum Smith headlining about, and then try to add in Jesus Ramos on that too.
I don't know about that. I feel like Benavidez is a Vegas guy now. I think the next logical step is to bring Benavidez to the East Coast, bring him to New York, or put him in California. See if he can attract some of the Mexican people out there. I think Arizona, that's a stay busy fight venue for David Benavidez now. He's a little bit too big for that now.
Yeah.
I think the card against Morrell did reasonably well at the gate.
Did
reasonably well on pay-per-view. So I think he's only going to do Arizona, but it's like a stay busy fight.
Yeah, I think, what was it? The last time he was out there was for David Lemieux. And he had the Kyron Davis fight out there in the Footprint Center in Phoenix. So
if he fights Jesse Hart, you could put that in Arizona.
Yeah.
something like that. But
Hmm.
if he's gonna get like a Callum Smith or someone of that caliber or a decent enough name, I
Right.
think you got to put that in either Cali, Vegas, or New York.
And the thing is I don't think Benavidez is someone that will go a little bit below pay per view at this point. I think he's had these past few fights have been around that pay per view level. So after having what he had here against David Morrell Jr., like I think they're just gonna have him featured on a pay per view type card. Given what he is paid for these fights and all that type of stuff. So that's why I'm looking at there for David Benavidez. But on the flip there with Jesus Ramos, like I could see him at in Glendale, Arizona, or in Phoenix having a fight card out there, fighting against one of these guys. But like we were mentioning there with Jamel Charlo, we got to see if he's going to be in the mix there at 154 pounds. You know what I mean? Shout out to
Absolutely. But one more thing on Benavidez.
Word.
I think PBC and TGB and Sampson, they're going to have to get creative with his matchmaking because it's becoming painfully obvious that they may try to freeze him out of that division. The same with Canelo
Mhm.
froze him out at 168. So I think they're gonna have to get creative, like maybe bring up one of those guys for 168, like a Jamal Charlo, or maybe beat the hell out of Berlanga, bring him up at 168, give him some money or something like that. They're gonna have
Mhm.
to get creative with his matchmaking in order to maintain or grow his level of stardom that he's at right now.
Yeah, because a number of these fighters that they have there 175, they're going to be one way involved with Riyadh season or Turkey LLC or something. So you're not going to get a guy like if you can't get a Callum Smith, you might not be able to get like a Joshua Bawatsi or like an Anthony Yard or something like that. Like, so what are they going to be able to do there with David Benavidez to get one of those high level fights there at 175 pounds? That's going to be the quandary there for David Benavidez at that point. And we talked about the main event, the co-feature bout, and then you had the opener there with Elijah Garcia against Terrell Garcia. Garcia, of course, like had his first loss to Kyron Shut It Down Davis. That was what last year in Las Vegas. There by a split decision. Going up against Terrell Garcia, who was former like world title challenger. His last bout there was on that same card against Carlos Adames for the WBC middleweight title. So this was a interesting bout here. You had Elijah Garcia has had his first bout under the tutelage of Bob Santos, and here with Terrell Garcia with coming in with a record of 24 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. We had to see like, okay, is this going to be the point where if he can't get past Garcia there at the middleweight division, that's pretty much it as far as like him being any type of contender there. But in this bout, he was putting in work. He caught Elijah Garcia early in round 1, was able to knock him down and scored a number of good, landed a couple of good punches there over the course of the bout. And well, it looked like it was pretty tough there for Elijah Garcia over the course of those 10 rounds, and it went the full 10. And the decision went out, and you had one judge have it 95-94 in favor of Terrell Garcia, had one judge have it 95-94 in favor of Elijah Garcia, and then last judge had it 96-93 in favor of Elijah Garcia. Now, for me, looking at those scores, you didn't have one judge have 6 rounds in favor of Terrell Garcia. Only 5, pretty much 5 rounds at the most. With the knockdown, that's why you have 95-94. The other 2 judges had it either 6 rounds in favor of Garcia or 7 rounds in favor of Garcia for that bout. And it was crazy. It says, Jojo says, that was the biggest robbery of the year so far. Garcia won clearly. He deserves another
Relax,
opportunity.
relax, relax. The biggest robbery so far was Carlos Adames versus Hamza Shiraz. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, like if you got Turkey Al Sheikh telling Hamza Shiraz that he's 2 rounds down in the middle of the fight. Yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, this one here, yeah, I mean, Gausha did his thing there, man. And it just looked like they just didn't feel like they would want to award him, those rounds, man. And that's tough break. You know, I wouldn't necessarily say it like Dave Chappelle, but it was a tough break though for him. You feel me? And for Elijah Garcia, I mean, he's there at just what 2021, right? Still got a lot to work on. I like to talk
I
with
think
Bob
I
Santos.
think he's like 22 now, but he's still fairly young. My thing
Yeah.
is, I thought that Gaucher won clearly, but I'm not gonna call it a robbery per se because maybe, and I this is why they need to interview judges after fights. I'm assuming that maybe the judges like the activity of Garcia more because Garcia did throw a lot more punches. I just think he was getting caught clean most of the night. I thought Gaucher won clearly,
Hmm.
but Elijah Garcia, he has a lot to work on. This was a very promising kid, but I'm kind of wondering if he is almost going the Gabe Flores Jr. route where
Mm.
he's starting to take a lot of punishment very early in his career, and then suddenly he's not at that top level anymore. I'm wondering if it was too much too soon for him, and maybe they need to pump the brakes on this kid and have him maybe fight off TV for a while just to sharpen his skills.
Yeah, I mean, he had his run where he had the win over the Doll in 2023, getting that KO victory. And once he had that, that was like undefeated versus undefeated. That put him in a position to be one of those contenders out there in the middleweight division. So they had to, push him to fight guys that are pretty tough or fairly ranked there in the middleweight division. So they had him there against Kevin Salgado. They had him there against Jose Resendiz. And then after that, they had him against, Kyron Davis, who, had been going like up and down within the middleweight and super middleweight divisions, but still had been competitive in the number of fights that he's had. So when he went up there against Kyron Davis, that like really showed where he's at as far as like a fighter, that he still had a lot to work on. So after that, he's going up against the Terrell Gausha, who also has like a good amount of experience there under his belt. So I'm thinking I'm like 2 straight fights against guys that have been in the ring with like former or current world champions or something like that. That's a crazy look for Elijah Garcia this early in his career. That's
I
what.
think I think what it is that Elijah Garcia doesn't do well against the quote unquote black style. That's all it is. You got guys that move and can counter, slick move counterers.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't like he can't. First of all, he doesn't move his head, so
right.
he's right there to be countered. But when you put guys in there that's just like looking to trade and stuff like that, he does very well because he's very
Hmm.
good offensively where he could beat on them. But when you
Hmm.
have guys that know how to move a little bit, that know how to even like move
Like pretty good
subtly in the
defense, like
pocket,
be able
yeah,
to have a good
yeah,
guard.
exactly. When you have guys like that, he's shown that he struggles against that. So for me, I just think they need to go back to the drawing board on the matchmaking for Elijah Garcia until he can close those deficiencies. And if he can't close those deficiencies, then just put him in exciting fights where he can beat the hell out of people if you want to build him up. Just don't put him in there with someone like Kyron Davis and stay far away from Evans Landy Lara. I'm gonna tell you
Oh,
that right now.
he's human food.
Evans Landy Lara would have put his lights out last night. Just
Yeah.
you gotta stay far away from that, man. You gotta put him up against guys that he could beat on. And there's a lot of guys like that in the middleweight division. Maybe you could put him up against a Shane Mosley Jr. or something like that. Go sign that guy. There's a lot of guys at middleweight who I think will be right there for him to style on offensively.
Now we have Shane Mosley Jr. that is, scheduled to fight on April 12th. I think it's over in New Mexico, something like that. Currently, he is at number 2 in the WBA rankings, at least right now. We have to see, what they do here at the end of this month. But you have like a number of other fighters that could be available. Maybe I don't know, Kieran Conway or maybe a Connor Coyle or something like that, Elijah Garcia could face. Now, Connor Coyle is a guy that, is a little bit like in front of you, but still has a style where he could, gauge the range pretty well and be able to counter too. Like he had the bout there against Vito Milnicki Jr. that ended up as a draw. So, maybe there's other potential matchups out there, but the problem is like I was mentioning earlier, with Garcia having those fights against the Resendizes and the Amarcal Vidals that already put him in the rankings at the bottom of the rankings for these sanctioning bodies. Now it's like, okay, how do we match him up to where either he can still continue to build his profile, or do we match him up against guys that are around that same range in the rankings and see if he could climb up to get closer to a title shot?
Yeah. He said, "Let him fight Jahad Tucker." Are you crazy? Come on, man. Come on. No. They need to put him up against a guy who's not really a counter puncher mover. Just put him up a guy that just likes to fight, that's coming to brawl. Maybe Elijah Garcia is best against brawlers, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be the thing there for him, and just build him up that way. So hopefully the matchmakers they will think about that. I don't know if he's there with like who was our guy, Luis de Cubas Jr. or something like that. Maybe that he could match Elijah Garcia up with more of those guys that'll stand right in front of him, so he can work on a few things before he's in a position to fight for a top contender spot within that particular division. So we have to see how that goes. There's like a number of other fights that were, on that card. Where you had like another Robert Guerrero that was on there. It got a TKO victory. You had Joseph Brown there from, of course, TMT, basically Floyd Mayweather's joint there, Mayweather Promotions that was on. And a few other young fighters there that were undefeated. It was pretty much like showcase fights because everyone outside of that main card, they basically had an undefeated record that was on A side. They all either like won by KO or TKO or something like that, except for Rojas and Garcia. So that was pretty much it. What we got, like I think it's around like another 15 minutes here before we get to like an hour in for the podcast. But wanted to let me see here, man. Which one I'll go to first? Yeah, let's go to the joint here with the George Kambosos joint over at Australia. Like, I don't understand this thing here with George Kambosos. What is the so-called infatuation with George Kambosos Jr.? Okay, listen, I get it. He had the fight against Teofimo Lopez for the unified. Let me say this again. The unified lightweight titles, he was able to get the win. Okay. After that, he got pretty much outboxed by Devin Haney twice. Okay. So after that was pretty much, the deal there with George Kambosos Jr. Okay. He had one fight after those two Devin Haney fights against a Maxie Hughes, where some people even thought that he didn't even beat Maxie Hughes. Then he goes up against Vasily Lomachenko, and that was for a vacant lightweight title. And he got, pretty much beat up for 11 rounds. So after all of that, so that's losing 3 of his past 4 fights. One of them, that one win was a questionable win to some. And then he was able to be signed by Matchroom Boxing for him to be put in a position to fight in the super lightweight division. And before his fight took place on March 22nd, They were able to put him in a position to be in the top 3 in the IBF rankings for super welterweight. Scheduled to face Daoud Yordan. Daoud Yordan gets, withdraws there due to injury, and then he faces a local guy in Jake Willie or whatever it is. And in that, it's like everybody expects him to get through or get by Jake Willie with, not that many problems. And then he ends up having to go a full 12 rounds, gets cut in the process. And in 2 cards, he won 9 rounds to 3, and 1 card he won 7 rounds to 5. But if they're saying that he could potentially face Richardson Hitchins in a few months, come on, man. That to me is, man, that's that's a hustling move right there. That is a hustling move just to be. There you go. CW says George Kambosos is just like Rolly Romero. Oh man. But if he is able to get a fight with Richardson Hitchins for the IBF title, that's crazy work. Absolutely crazy work. Losing 3 of the last 4 fights. Having this bout against Jake Willie, like, come on, what are we doing? What are we doing? Listen, Richardson Hitchins should be facing Subio Matias to defend that IBF title. But we might have George Kambosos. I hope they say that he isn't cleared to fight by that June date that Eddie Hearn was talking about. But we're talking about Eddie Hearn here. So
I think Richardson Hitchens has 0 intention of facing Subrio Matias because that Matias fight is due by the end of the summer. So if he's fighting in June, how is he going to be ready by the end of the summer? I think what he's going to do is he's going to fight George Kambosos and then probably vacate. I'm not too sure he's going to end up fighting Subrio Matias, and it's a shame. It really is a shame because I think that fight could do well, and that fight would do much more for Richardson Hitchens' name than a George Kambosos.
definitely.
Let's be honest. And I respect everybody who steps in the ring. Obviously it's the hurt business, but George Kambosos sucks. Like he's trash. He's a palooka. And I think that I will never forgive Teofimo Lopez for turning George Kambosos into a thing. This is his fault. This is his fault. Like George Kambosos should have never been at that level at all, ever. Like he didn't even really win that eliminator to become mandatory. I thought he lost
He
that fight
didn't.
too. I thought he lost that fight too.
Yes,
Like
yes.
he's not good. Like he is a domestic level fighter. That's what
Oh,
he is. But because people just assume he has a country behind him because he's from another country, which is not true. Because I saw that arena, it looked like a Riyadh season event. Nobody was in there. Okay, so
mhm.
don't say he has a country behind him. Nobody cares about George Kambosos, like Eddie Hearn, Richardson Hitchens. You could try to turn George Kambosos to a thing. You could try to say, "Oh, we're gonna bring that fight to New York. It's gonna be a big deal, bro." Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I live right in New York, and I might walk past the venue, and if they say, "Hey, come in, just come watch the fight," I'm like, you know what? I gotta go wash my hair. I'm good, man.
I gotta go to the store, man. I gotta pick up a few things from the store. That's how you be.
Yeah. It's like
Oh
they're
man.
turning it into a thing, and I don't get it. Just fight Subrio Matias next. That's the fight for you, Richardson Hitchens. Fight him next.
Now I'm gonna go into that there a little bit, but let's go into this thing with George Kambosos, right? Because like I was saying, man, come on, we talking about George Kambosos. All right. Now I'm gonna go through these fights here. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Mickey Bay, that was a split decision. Lee Selby, that was a split decision. Teofimo Lopez, that was a split decision. The 2 fights against Devin Haney, the Maxie Hughes fight, a majority decision, Vasyl Lomachenko, where he got absolutely washed, and then this last bout that happened yesterday. That is your recent resume or a CV or whatever you want to call it with George Kambosos Jr. Now, folks, listening right now, does that tell you that he should be in a position to fight for the IBF super lightweight title against Richardson Hitchins? No. How about Subriel Matias, the former IBF super lightweight champion who lost it to Liam Perro, who lost it to Richardson Hitchins? How about that? Let's go to that. So this is the same Subriel Matias that held the IBF belt, and Richardson Hitchins worked up the rankings to become number 1 contender in the IBF and could have potentially been the mandatory for the IBF when Subriel Matias had it. So now you flip it, and Hitchins has the belt. Matias won the final eliminator, could eventually become the mandatory, and you mean to tell me that Hitchins ain't really jumping at the bit to fight Subriel Matias and get that mandatory out of the way? I don't know. I don't know what this comment is all about. Like, come on. What are we doing? Giorgio says Kambosos' manager is the best manager of the modern era. Actually, right now, I don't even know who his manager is because I thought he was under Peter Kahn, and I don't think he's under Peter Kahn anymore. So, I mean, I don't know. Hey, listen, like to be in position to have those type of fights, that's absolutely crazy. It says Hitchins wants to measure himself against George Kambosos. He'll go to 147 after and chase the big names like Haney. So he wants to measure himself against a guy that oh my God. Oh, that's I'm sorry, y'all. That's absolutely crazy work. Okay. That's what we got, I guess, on slate there so far with George Kambosos, but nah, that's not a good look.
Hold on. But I see this comment. Hitchins want to measure himself versus Kambosos. Who the fuck is he measuring himself against? Everybody cooked George Kambosos. Who is he measuring himself against? I don't get it.
George Maybe Devin Haney. I don't know.
But Devin Haney cooked them easily in both fights. So who is he measuring himself against? Lomachenko with a back injury stopped him. Who is he measuring himself against? Like I don't get it. And then I see this other comment. Kambosos got a better resume to Tank. Who gives a shit about Tank? Like, why are we talking about Tank? Who gives a fuck about Tank?
We ain't even bringing him up.
Why are we talking about Tank? It's bro, like these people. Do y'all want to talk boxing and break down what we're talking about, or do you just want to do the what about this and what about this, what about that? Elevate the conversation, dude. What are we doing here?
Oh man, it's absolutely insane at times, with this thing, man. Wanted to get it also to the co-feature bout, the bout that a number of people were actually looking forward to seeing in this fight card. And it's one of those things, like I said, women's boxing, Sky Nicholson versus Tiara Brown, there for the WBC featherweight title. Like there are a number of people saying that like Tiara Brown wouldn't want to go ahead and have that fight with Sky Nicholson. She signed on the dotted line. She was determined. She was ready to go. She was ready for that action. She went out there to Australia, faced the fighter there that's out of Queensland, or basically they're around that same area or whatnot. Went in there, executed what she needed to execute, and got the decision win. It was a split decision win. There's one judge had it 6 rounds to 4 in favor of Sky Nicholson, but it was overruled by one judge that had it 6-4 for Tiara Brown, and another judge that had it 7 rounds to 3 for Tiara Brown for her to win that WBC belt, hand Sky Nicholson the first loss. And this is a great win here for Tiara Brown. She's been waiting for this opportunity for a world title for at least a couple years now. I know a few people were talking about level of competition that she had up to that point didn't necessarily measure up to what Sky Nicholson was doing, but I just said I felt like the matchup was just not that good for Sky Nicholson unless she had something that could really keep Tiara Brown off of her. You know what I mean? And yeah, props to Tiara Brown. And like I said, I'm working on seeing if I could have an interview with her trainer later on down the line. And then once that happens, maybe I can also have Tiara Brown on as well. They just got back from being over in Australia there. Of course, long flights, going across the Pacific and then, landing probably in Los Angeles, the connector, and then getting over to, their home area. So props to Tiara Brown. She executed very well, particularly in the first part of the fight. For Sky Nicholson, I felt like she missed a number of punches, particularly in the first half of the fight, was like out of range. And then in the second half, when she tried to get up close, that's when Tiara Brown was basically in her element, going up close, working the body and that type of stuff. So, hey, props to Tiara Brown. Not sure about if they're gonna, have something set up for a rematch. That's what Sky Nicholson is looking for. I'm not sure if the WBC had made it officially a mandatory defense there, but if not, then yeah, we might be able to see a rematch. But if so, shall break for Sky Nicholson. What you got here, real quick? Because no, you might be on for a couple more minutes there, Matt.
So first of all, it wasn't mandatory, so there is no rematch clause.
Here's a rematch.
And oh well, oh well.
Well,
Listen, I think Scott Nicholson avoided taking that fight long enough, and then we saw why. We saw why. I thought this was a clear victory for Tiara Brown. I was surprised that someone gave Scott Nicholson a card. I was When I heard her name, I was like, "Oh my God, they're about to rob this girl," because this makes
yeah.
no sense.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Nicholson could do absolutely nothing, and listen, she's not aesthetically pleasing. Like, let's be honest, she's not aesthetically pleasing. She's not a name. She's a subsidized fighter. Okay, she's a subsidized fighter, which is fine because there's a lot of subsidized fighters in boxing.
Yeah.
But people talk about her as if she's a big deal. She's not a big deal. Now she has to go back to the drawing board, and I'm curious to see what OTX does with Tiara Brown because if I'm not mistaken, this is OTX's first world champion.
Yep.
So I'm curious
Well,
to see what they
wait.
do with her.
Isn't well? It might not be their first world champion. They do have another fighter that has been on OTX that is a world champion. And apparently you had a post on social media. Who is it from Boxing Scene? Something where
Oh yeah. O'Shea Jones, bro. What was that, bro? What was
yeah,
that?
congratulations to Tiara Brown, and then you post a picture and it's O'Shea Jones. Come on, Woody. Come on. Oh my God.
And bro, it's not like they were fighting each other where you could probably might just put up the wrong graphic. Like you had to go and think
Yeah,
that
that's
was
so
her.
funny.
Yeah, mind you, they're 10 years apart, and they're like 30 pounds apart, and they look nothing alike. They look nothing alike. Now I see my guy Gorgior saying that Scott is a name in women's boxing. If Scott Nicholson is a name in women's boxing, tell me what has she headlined? She's literally been subsidized on these cards by Eddie Hearn. She
Mm-hmm.
she she hasn't headlined her own show. And even this homecoming for her in Australia that was supposed to be a big deal, only maybe like 1,000 or so people showed up. So she can't be a big name. What's your definition of a big name in women's boxing when you can't even at the very least headline a show? Let's be honest. There's only a couple big names in women's boxing. You got Katie Taylor, you got Clarissa
Mhm.
Shields, and you got Amanda Serrano. I don't even consider Alicia Bumgarner a big name, and I think she's popular. It just hasn't translated to her selling tickets like that. There's
Yeah.
only three big names in women's boxing. That's it. So let's not overrate what's happening with Scott Nicholson, because now you're gonna have to show me the data. Show me the data that shows she's a big name. Show me where she's headlining at. Show me a ticket that she sold. Show me anything that shows that she's a big name. You won't be able to find it because she's been getting subsidized by Eddie Hearn. Eddie
Mm.
Hearn's been throwing her on these cards and in these spots because of, well, I won't get into that.
No, yeah,
But
no, no, no,
yeah,
no.
yeah. All I'm gonna say is that she's been subsidized by Eddie Hearn. She's not a big name. They
All
want you
right.
to believe she's a big name, but the stats just don't bear that out.
You don't, yeah. Like if you're on a card against Diana Vargas and the headliner is Jerome Butsinis, that was what, back in July. Then the next fight that you have there is against fighter there at Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So
Against
and she
against against Raven Chapman. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
against
against
Raven
Raven
Chapman.
Chapman. Yeah.
That fight on the Boots card really pissed me off because who gives a fuck about Scott Nicholson in Philadelphia? Tell me, who knows who Scott Nicholson is in Philadelphia? But like I said, she's being subsidized by Eddie Hearn. That's all it is. That's
Hmm.
all it is. Like she's not even a big deal in her own home country. You had two hometown fighters who people told me has a country behind them in Scott Nicholson and George Kambosos, and they couldn't even sell out a family dinner together on the same card. So don't tell me she's a big name in women's boxing.
Can't be. Definitely can't be. And on the flip side, I gotta share the post. Like I gotta do it. Like, come on, y'all. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing, boxing scene? What are we doing? You're saying and the new, and it's actually posted. It was actually posted on there, so you can't say that this is nothing where it's no AI or nothing like that. We actually know that this is O'Shea Jones. Okay, so you mean to tell me, boxing scene, that you actually thought about this, or someone on your team actually created this on Photoshop and put O'Shea Jones on there, and then y'all posted it like it was Tiara Brown. Come on, y'all.
Listen,
Come
listen,
on.
listen, listen. They thought it was Tiara Brown. And that's the problem, bro. They clearly don't follow boxing like that, which is fine. That is fine. I'm just curious as to what they typed in for for O'Shea Jones to come up. Because I tried to do a Google image search for Tiara Brown, and I did not see one picture of O'Shea Jones. So, like, what did you guys type in that you found a picture of O'Shea Jones? I was like,
O'Shea
yo,
Jones.
you are boxing scene. You are one of the preeminent boxing sites in boxing, and you don't even know the damn fighters. You don't even know the fighters. Like what are we doing here?
Like, who is your editor in chief? Who is controlling your social media account to
Listen,
actually post
I have
this?
I have a theory. I have a theory. All right, and I don't know if this has to get cut from the show, but I do have a theory. I think maybe Gary Jonas hired one of the patients from his rehab facility to give them a job so they can stay out of trouble and hire them as the social media manager, and they don't know boxing. That's the only thing I can think of.
You know what? I might have to cut it from the show.
That shit had me rolling. That shit had me rolling. So all right. So what's worse? What's worse? O'Shea Jones as Tiara Brown, or Kendrick or Terrence Crawford as Kendrick Lamar.
Oh, it got to be O'Shea Jones. I'm sorry, it gotta be.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, listen, hey, listen. I'm still gonna go with the Kendrick Lamar thing. I'm
Oh.
going with the Kendrick Lamar thing. That was fucking funny. That was fucking funny.
Oh man, that was crazy. That was crazy though, but it is, man. Oh, that yeah, but come on, y'all. O'Shea Jones though, like y'all posted O'Shea Jones, and that come on, y'all. What are we doing? That's crazy work. Like I said, man, that's absolutely, positively, undeniably crazy work. But like I said, props to Jared Brown, of course, like new WBC champion. Shout out to the camp there for Tiara Brown, Ernesto Rodriguez, there as trainer. Like I said, we'll be working on having Ernesto Rodriguez as a guest for the midweek report coming up Wednesday. So that's going to be something for y'all to look forward to on the midweek report. So, that's what I had there for that particular fight card. You had the Pro Box TV show. This one, it stands out a little bit for me here right now because of our esteemed panelist here, Matt from Brunch Boxing. Now, we talked about the fight card that was at the Mandalay Bay Event Center in Las Vegas. Now, Brunch Boxing did have a representative out there in Las Vegas for that fight card. Headlined by Sebastian Fundora versus Cordell Booker. Okay, shout out to Mike of Brunch Boxing for covering that event. Now we had this thing here with ProBox that was in San Bernardino, California, and Brunch Boxing had another representative to go out to San Bernardino to cover that particular fight card. But it looks like things didn't necessarily work out too well at the Pro Box card for people to see if they could get coverage from Brunch Boxing. Oh man, it is. Listen, you could have had a number of. You could have had some great content, there from Brunch Boxing. Okay, but apparently, the correspondent that was in attendance there at San Bernardino, um, as of I guess this current juncture, maybe Matt could give us an update. They didn't necessarily get much coverage from that particular event. Brother Matt, could you expound on what happened over there in San Bernardino?
When you say we didn't get much coverage, what you mean is we didn't get any coverage. Okay. And what really ticks me off? What really ticks me off is because I had to do a lot to get those credentials, okay? Because I had to go through someone that was working on the show to get the credentials because I still don't know how to apply to ProBox. I don't know what's going on with ProBox. I gotta figure out what's going on with that. Well, they need to figure it out. They need a media communications department, okay? Because it's very hard to apply to their shows. So I had to do a lot to get those credentials, and he was invited backstage. He was invited to hang out backstage the whole fight, the whole card if he wanted to. And he said, "No, I'm good. I'm good." So the only thing we got was a selfie of him and Lester Martinez. I was like, what the fuck, dude? What are we doing here? But I got to say, it was a good card, though. It was a very good card.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good card. Jasmine Artiga, who was a guest on Brunch Boxing before, she did win the vacant WBO super flyweight title. I did see that some people thought that she lost, but uh, At the end of the day, she was given the victory. You know, it is what it is. I, I'll be honest with you. I don't really score women's fights like that because I can't tell when women land punches. I really can't. I'm not gonna lie to you. I can't tell. I can't tell. But
Oh my
but
God.
but it was a good card. Lester Martinez, he showed out. I thought his performance was excellent. I liked what we was about to see from Kelvin Davis, but that stoppage was a shit stoppage. I thought Kelvin Davis was about to perform well. I thought Jesse Magdaleno looked very good against a no hoper.
Mhm.
And that Vladimir Hernandez Isaias Lucero's fight was a good fight too. I
Yep.
just thought overall that was a damn good card, and I thought overall it was a very good day of boxing.
Yeah, it was. It was. Um, and the thing, as far as like this particular card, like you explained there, with Kelvin Davis, for me, I was happy that Kelvin Davis was able to get a fight there, as far as like have an opponent lined up and things like that. He was originally scheduled to fight on March 8th, but they couldn't secure that opponent in time. So they said, hey, we'll have you see if we can have you back a couple weeks later around the same state or whatnot. So all he did was go back to Vegas, do some more work in Vegas, and then they said, "Hey, we got you here for the 22nd," and had that opponent there for him there in Jose Marufo. And like you were talking about, yeah, Kelvin Davis was executing very well at that particular point, and he should have got like a definitive stoppage victory, or at least a definitive knockdown in that bout. The referee there, Ray Corona, stepped in and was like, "Come on, like had to be more definitive." But still, all in all, Kelvin Davis did his thing. Props to him on that. You talk about Jesse Magdaleno getting a early TKO win over Luis Correa. Correa's had like his third straight loss or something like that. He's fought Omar Salcido on a red out. I think it was a red out card or something like that. Fought undefeated Charlie Suarez last year. So Jesse, getting, trying to get himself in the mix, back in the mix or something. That's a fight to, kind of like get him back active. The Artiga fight against Chavez, they said it was really close. Hey, I mean, it's something there where, you could flip a coin. Now, I ain't going to go as far as what Matt said, saying that you can't even tell who's landing punches or whatever it is. Like, come on, man, that's crazy. But, Artiga got the win there. And Vladimir Hernandez, of course, is like an action fighter there within that 140 54-pound division, or 160, depending on where he's at. We had the fights against Chuck Simpson, against Troy Isley, against Guido Strom, where he had that knockout victory there on Pro Box. So he's been on Pro Box these past 3 fights that he's had. So he's kind of been one of those, as they could say, staples within the Pro Box TV circuit. There, and in his win over Isaias Lucero, he was very consistent in his attack, even though he got knocked down early in the bout, but he was still consistent throwing punches, and both of those guys were landing some big punches there, and still, they were still clicking. They were still going at it. Round 9, round 10, they were still going at it. So it was good, action there from both of those fighters in that. And then in the main event, Lester Martinez, of course, they had the bout rescheduled twice, but Lester Martinez looked like, he was a fighter that we saw against Carlos Gongora over in Washington, D.C. That was his last bout against Gongora, was able to execute there very well. Joshawn James, I mean, he had a good start there in rounds 1 and rounds 2, but he just couldn't hold his hand on, hold the phone. He couldn't hold the phone. You know what I mean? It was almost like, what we saw with Haney Garcia or whatever it is. I mean, I know, the whole thing with the result and all that, but Haney didn't hold the phone, and he just ended up paying for it. You know what I mean? Ended up paying for it. So good work from Lester Martinez. He's there, like I said, in the super middleweight division, very packed super middleweight division. He is currently ranked number 2 in the WBA there. And, he's floating around, so to speak, right? I know that there was some talk about another super middleweight that was watching fights at another venue, but I would like to see a Lester Martinez how he would do against a Caleb Plant, you know, um, or against a Diego Pacheco. Guys like Christian and Billy and Alcides Iglesias, they may be lined up for fights later on down the line. I think it's supposed to be May 18th or something like that. With the Eye of the Tiger promotions over in Canada, but you can still have a few matchups out there for Lester Martinez that's around that top 7, top 10 at the 168-pound division before he could be, slated as a guy that says, hey, you know what? Maybe he could eventually challenge for a world title there at 168 pounds, either, at the end of this year or sometime next year, So props for Lester Martinez. Of course, he had, dealt with a lot, over the past 6 months plus, and some folks said that, I don't know, maybe he might not have been able to be healthy enough to try to get back in the ring. But he was able to do what he did there and get the win over Joshawn James. Yeah, I don't know what I mean, yo. So yeah, I'm sorry, but that's kind of a questionable comment. I mean, I know you want to show some props to some fighters, but in this live chat, but I don't know that's kind of getting a little bit crazy out there. So I had to do it. I'm sorry. But once again, props to Lester Martinez there on that front for him getting that win over Joshawn James. It was where he was very sharp in that bout. And you had B&B Boxing Academy being featured on that Pro Box card there, not just with Lester Martinez and Kelvin Davis, but I think it was Charles Harris also as part of their team. So they were able to get a clean sweep there on that Pro Box fight card. So that's what they had there on Pro Box TV. And also what you mentioned there for Pro Box, right? They kind of handle things just as far as getting the venue, securing the venue, and securing the fighters. As far as the PR, they deal with that locally. Let's see. Robert Garcia, they say that Robert Garcia was registered as the promoter for that particular event there at San Bernardino, right? But when you talk about other Pro Box cars like they had over in my area, they had a PR team there that kind of handled it here on our side, which might be the same thing that happens here for April 12th. So what it is, I'll see if I could confirm this here as far as their thing, but No Excuse Promotions will likely have a group that'll handle the whole thing with the PR, just like they did with their previous events. So with that, they'll do that for April 12th. In these other events that Pro Box will have, it'll probably end up having either a local promoter handle the thing for PR, or maybe they could find some type of PR company that's around that area that'll handle it. But yeah, Pro Box itself, yeah, they really all too hard as far as trying to see about getting credentials. Now I know that brother Matt has been on here for a little bit. He has something that he's preparing for later this evening. But we also have another distinguished panelist that's going to be joining us here right now on the Boxing Source podcast to talk about the action that happened yesterday. Of course, one of our distinguished panelists here that has a lot of insight of what's going on, and that's the Boxing Academic. What's going on?
Not much. How y'all fellas doing?
Doing all good, man. Doing all good. Just having a boxing talk, covered most of the thing here with what went down yesterday. So since you were just able to join in here,
can I make a disclaimer before you ask me a question? I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Okay.
I'm saying this with the expectation that this is a safe space. Okay. I'm saying it with the expectation that this is a safe space. I came on the show a little bit later because I saw Matt was on the show, and I didn't want to be judged for what I for what I did in my past. I didn't want to be judged. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm just simply saying I didn't watch the boxing matches yesterday. I was watching basketball. I ain't gonna even lie. I was watching basketball, and I think I watched a movie too.
First of all, color me not surprised. Color me not
I
surprised.
mean, can I finish and just ask my question? I wasn't done. I mean, I
Okay.
just don't want to be judged. That's why I kind of waited. So
Okay.
I thought this was a safe space,
Okay. Okay.
and I wanted to talk about George Foreman.
All right. All right. All
Go
right.
ahead,
So
Matt.
yeah, we pretty much,
No, go ahead, Matt. Be mean.
like,
Go ahead. Be a a-hole, Matt.
I was gonna,
Well, listen. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Basketball academic. I appreciate you joining the show as always. Okay. But let's if JBZ is done talking the live events, we could talk George Foreman for a little bit.
yeah.
Because
Yeah, we definitely could do. We definitely can do that because that was going to be, one segment of the show that I was going to have in reference to George Foreman. So you can open it. You can open it up as far as like your thoughts in reference to George Foreman and what he's done.
so obviously, for those who've been living under a rock, the great George Foreman passed away over the weekend at age 76. For my money, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, one of the five greatest heavyweights of all time. George Foreman was my entry level into fandom in boxing. I followed his second act of his career. I bought the George Foreman KO boxing video game for Sega Genesis. Played it till my fingers were blistering.
I'm big, I'm bad, and I'm back.
Exactly. Obviously we know the iconic fight in 1994 against Michael Mora, but for me, George Foreman, and I know some people might disagree with me because listen, we all love the 90s, okay? But but I think George Foreman, to be able to accomplish what he accomplished in his second act kind of showed just how head and shoulders above the 90s that 70s era was. That's how gangster that 70s era was. That a guy that's in his 40s could go toe to toe with a Vander Holyfield and give him all that he got in the ring. Vander Holyfield in his fucking prime. Okay, a guy could knock out Michael Mora, who was like 35-0 at the time that they fought. Even Jerry Cooney, who was kind of past it, but he was like one of the guys of the 80s. We remember the iconic drive-by uppercut and then the brick hand finish. Like George Foreman, for me, for my money, is just one of the iconic figures in the sport of boxing. Um, when I think of George Foreman, listen, I think of the good and the bad. Especially as an African American, a lot of the older generation think back to the 1968 Mexico City Olympics when George Foreman didn't raise the fist and he waved the American flag instead, and he wasn't really welcomed back into the black community like that. After that, people thought that he wasn't supporting the movement, and he carried a lot of anger in that first part of his career. It almost seemed like he was not only fighting against the men in the ring, he was fighting against the whole community of people, And when on that night in Jamaica at the National Stadium in Jamaica, when he fought Joe Frazier and dribbled him like a basketball and became the heavyweight champion of the world, to me, that night signified the end of an era and the dawning of a new era, the George Foreman era. You know, George Foreman was the most dominant and most feared heavyweight since Sonny Liston at that time.
Hmm.
And then he went on and he beat the hell out of Ken Norton. And then that night in Kinshasa, you know, a older, like clearly past his prime, in my opinion, Muhammad Ali, you know, in Kinshasa, which is now the Democratic Republic of Congo, they Ali had the people, and Ali wouldn't be denied, and Ali ended George Foreman's reign and sort of ended the mystique. But one thing about that night that I want to touch on, people keep thinking that George Foreman was basically done after that Ali fight. But the very next fight in 1976 was the iconic slugfest between George Foreman and Ron Lau.
Yep.
You know, one of the greatest fights of all time. And
Hmm.
then he went ahead and beat the hell out of Joe Frazier again and stopped him in the 5th round. So just because he didn't beat Ali don't mean it was over for him, but that's the way the public went. And then we remember the exhibition match Foreman versus Five in, I think it was Toronto, Ontario, Canada. That was supposed to be basically him getting back in the good graces of the public, and it didn't go the way they thought it was going to go because Ali was there to hype up their rematch, and the crowd was behind Ali. They were booing Foreman, you know, and it didn't turn out the way that they wanted. And then he ended up losing to Jimmy Young in 1977
Hmm.
and retired. You know, and when he retired a guy who had the mystique broken, and he wasn't a man of the people, and it seemed like people were done with him. And then he had his literal come to Jesus moment where he became an evangelical pastor, you know, and doing humanitarian work and preaching the word of God, and he was just doing his thing for 10 years. And then when he announced that he was coming back at the age of 38, people were like, "What the hell is this guy coming back for? You know, this guy, he's old, he's fat. What is he supposed to do?" And he said, "I'm here to win the heavyweight title." And it took 7 years. It took 7 years, but it all culminated in that fateful night in 1994,
Hmm.
where that 1-2 put Michael Moorer down. And in that moment of triumph, what I always think about with George Foreman, in that moment of triumph, he wasn't celebrating and pumping the fist. Yeah, I did it. I won. He went right to that corner. He turned to the turnbuckle, dropped to his knees, and thanked God. You know, and then he had the fight against Axel Schultz. Most people thought he lost. I thought he lost, but he got the decision. But then it seemed like boxing was done with him because let's be honest, his last fight against Shannon Briggs, he won that fight. He beat Shannon Briggs. He beat Shannon Briggs, and they robbed George again the decision. I guess they were done with him. He was like 48 years old at the time, you know.
Hmm.
And then he was one of my favorite commentators with HBO.
Yep.
And another thing that I think about with George Foreman, okay, and this is shows the type of man that he is. That night where Prince Nassim Hamed fought Marco Antonio Barrera, and Jim Lampley made that disgusting comment about Prince Nassim and Allah and all this stuff. And in that moment, George was like, "Hey, don't do that. Don't disrespect that man's faith." And it's not like George is Muslim. George is not Muslim, but but he understood right from wrong, and you don't disrespect another man's faith, no matter what creed he comes from. So I thought that what he did in that moment basically exemplified the type of man that George Foreman was, you know, and it's a big loss for the boxing community. It's a big loss for the sports world in general, and you know, I think boxing is gonna miss George Foreman dearly.
Oh yeah, most definitely, most definitely. I'm gonna have Box Academic chime on this a little bit before I go over the life or the life and everything there for George Foreman. So Box Academic, you have the floor.
Yeah, that was a great That was a great description by Brunch Boxing, by Matt of Brunch Boxing. I'll probably keep it short and sweet. I was definitely a fan of George Foreman, and to me, George Foreman got a lot out of his tools. If if you had to choose a person that had a gift and use that gift to the greatest of that gift's ability, one person on that list would be George Foreman. And like Matt said, he was at one time the most feared man, around boxing, and not a lot of people wanted to fight him. And it was one unfortunate night. I mean, the fans won, but the night against Muhammad Ali was sort of that invincibility went away. Um, but we all won with the fight. We all won in every realm that we got him. And I will mention one thing that Matt failed to mention. I purchased his grill. I put money in his pocket. So, that's I'm sure everybody purchased his grill because at one time, that was like the best thing since sliced bread, the little quick grill. So um I would say some of my most notable things of George Foreman that I thought were very cool. Obviously the fight with Ron Lau, that was just our bodies are not. I enjoy this sport, but I enjoy it for the pugilism that it shows. And the fight with Ron Lau, our bodies are not meant to take that. And him and Ron gave everything they had in that fight, and it was something special. So you got to give people, you got to take a hat off to people who put their life on the line, because you got to know neither of them two guys weren't the same with all of that they were hitting each other. And they was just landing some big bombs. And Matt mentioned that it didn't get sort of the fanfare that maybe Foreman and team wanted, but the Foreman versus 5, if you go and you actually watch that, if you watch it from beginning to end, it's not something. I'm gonna repeat it because Matt just jumped back on. If you watch that Foreman versus 5, it's something that I don't think people of today's age can do, because the guys who we were fighting, okay, yeah, they was maybe sparring partners, but they were trying to win. They came in there trying to win, and I can't remember how many rounds he had with everybody, but all I know is I'm thinking to myself like, dang, this is crazy, and this is a heavyweight, and he doing this, and he fighting people who, again, they were probably level of sparring partners, but nevertheless, they were trying to win. So that was amazing to me just to sort of see that. And then I would say my third thing is just the mysticism around him and Ali's fight. Like obviously Ali capitalized and sort of had the game plan of the century, but you got to give it to George Foreman, because maybe before that, people were questioning, like if it didn't go the way it went, then we would have a different view of that fight, I would think. But it went how it went, so it is what it is. So yeah, I'm just a fan of George Foreman. I'm very pleased with the product that he gave us. Even his commentating, every time I listen to him, I learn something. If you hear people who talk about him, you can sort of see, as the example that Matt gave, he even had a level of compassion when he did his commentating. And so that's one thing that you'll always remember about him, is just his compassionate sort of spirit. And shout out to George Foreman, and I really appreciate everything that he's done for the sport.
Yeah, you were talking about the thing there with the grill, and it's something, because it's like people know about George Foreman in different eras. We talk about this stuff with what he did in boxing in the 70s and the 90s, but also after that, you talk about the George Foreman grill, and that a number of people who didn't necessarily follow boxing know him from the George Foreman grill. And I kind of like take that akin to like how a number of people knew about John Madden because of the video game, of course, John Madden, or like him being a commentator, a legendary commentator. But of course, he was the head coach there for the Oakland Raiders and one of the better coaches out there. So it's like you have to view these people in their full context and what they're basically started from, and not like necessarily what they could be most famous for, right? But with George Foreman, like he was pretty much defined as a fighter, like one of the top heavyweights, as Matt mentioned, one of the top 5 heavyweights of all time. Like if you say who would stand out as the top 3 heavyweight within the 70s, it will be George Foreman. He would probably be there at number 2. You know what I mean? Just below Muhammad Ali. And then you have, of course, the era of the 90s where he faced the, Evander Holyfield. He faced the Michael Moores. He faced, like you were saying there, Tommy Morrison or Shannon Briggs or Axel Schwartz. So he was also part of that particular era in the 90s, as they say that those are 2 golden eras of the heavyweight division, right? But if we, go back to, like we were saying there with him winning the gold medal in the 68 Olympics, and coming from his upbringing, where he, it came from, as far as like, not necessarily having, as they say, everything or, most of the stuff that maybe, young children had, he was still able to build himself up to start an amateur career in boxing, then get to the Olympics, be able to win the gold in the Olympics, then move on to be, as they say, one of the most intimidating fighters of his era at that time. Like his string of knockout victories up to the point that he faced Joe Frazier the first time was one of the highest KO ratios out there. So then he goes up against Joe Frazier, undefeated against undefeated. Of course, Joe Frazier there having the thing where he had the win there over Muhammad Ali, right? So he was the definitive champion. So soon after that, 2 years after that, you had Joe Frazier there facing George Foreman, and that's where you got, of course, one of the more memorable moments of boxing, where you had "Down Goes Frazier." That was the call that everybody referred to, right? So you got that point. He's able to win the title, have the fight against Jose Roman, have the fight after that against Ken Norton, where he knocks out Ken Norton in 2 rounds. And Ken Norton was known as like one of the toughest fighters out there in the heavyweight division of that era. So you're going up against Joe Frazier, Jose Roman, Ken Norton, then of course the fight there against Muhammad Ali, Rumble in the Jungle, and then 2 years later against Ron Lau. That is a crazy run in the heavyweight division. And it didn't stop there, because the next fight after fighting Ron Lau, he has the rematch with Joe Frazier in Uniondale. So he definitely had, a great run there, particularly in the 70s. Had that bout against Jimmy Young where he lost by decision. Went out, as they said, he could have been basically exiled as far as like the fans and stuff of the sport. So he pretty much been, out of the picture for about 10 years. Got back in the mix, went back on a streak of KO victories, TKO victories, and then he finally has like the opportunity to fight for the world title there first against Evander Holyfield in one of those battles that was a all-time classic battle there against Evander Holyfield. And he fell short there in that one, but then he still had 2 to 3 more bouts until he fought Tommy Morrison, and then lost to Tommy Morrison. So you go up against Michael Moore, at the time undefeated, beat the champ, basically beat Evander Holyfield at the time. So he's 35-0. Nobody really gave him a shot. November 5th, 1994. And he gets through that bout, and Michael Moore is just, tagging him, outboxing him. But this isn't necessarily like seriously hurting George Foreman. And then he just has that moment there in the 10th round where it's just the 1-2, stick, bam. And then once again, boom, puts down Michael Moore and knocks him out to become the heavyweight champion of the world. And even at that time in '94, like I still knew about, of course, yeah, we grew up with the Tysons and the whole thing with the lineage at the time, Tyson, Douglas, Holyfield. So you had more and all of that stuff. But we still knew about what happened back in the '70s with, the whole thing with Ali, the whole thing with Frazier, Foreman, Lau, Norton. So seeing George Foreman there after like being out of the mix as far as like the world title there for almost 20 years, and for him to do what he did there against Michael Moore, that to me was the most shocking moment that I was able to see when it happened. Like I wasn't able to see, Buster Douglas knock out Mike Tyson live. Like a lot of us couldn't really do that because one, it was in Tokyo, and that was like back in the, back in '88. So we weren't able to see that live. We had to look at the newspaper and see that, wait a minute, Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson. So here we had this opportunity to see this world title fight that was in Las Vegas between Michael Moore and George Foreman. And for George Foreman to knock him out, that was just one thing that I just felt like was one of the moments that has like stuck with me through the course of, either being a fan of boxing or covering boxing. That moment right there just said, hey, this is something that said, like, as Kevin Garnett says, anything's possible. So that right there kind of like stood out to me for George Foreman in his professional career. And, as I said, he went on to have a commentating career there under HBO Sports, and was one of those guys that kind of like was a great analyst out there, along with like a Emmanuel Stewart. You had like Roy Jones that had been part of it. We know Lennox Lewis had been part of it at one time, but George Foreman was one of those guys that stood out there as far as like a top level commentator there for the sport of boxing. You know what I mean? So that's the thing that I had in reference to him as far as like being one of the more iconic figures in the sport of boxing out there. Like I said, when you name famous fighters or whatnot, you have the Tysons, you have the Holyfields, you have the Alis that you had back in the day, you had Joe Frazier's. But after all of that, like, you got to have George Foreman. You got to have George Foreman. And as I mentioned, with him being a I would say top 5 heavyweight all time, that would be also one thing that I would say about George Foreman as well. So that was one thing I got here. And before, I add on our next panelist here to join us here for a little bit, I want to give a shout out to my guy from Urban Sports Scene in the building. He says that not even Floyd Mayweather or Tyson Fury compares when it comes to multiple successful stints. George Foreman unretires and becomes a world champion. He has thing with of course, George Foreman Grill, the broadcasting, charisma, etc. Hashtag legend there. So you got that, and want to bring in another one of our great panelists on here. Of course, is our resident chef of the Boxing Source podcast. Brother Terrell is in the building. What's going on, Terrell?
Hey, what's up? What's up, guys? And Mike, man, we definitely got to make a bet for this game coming up. We definitely got to get that locked in.
On Michigan and Auburn.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, let's go. Yeah, we'll talk.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely want to jump on the pod here, particularly for George Foreman. I know you guys already covered this, but just want to briefly say he's a legend, and not just in boxing. Boxing, of course, is what gave him his fame, but his crossover into mainstream America with the George Foreman cookers and television shows. I mean, he's done everything. He's what can I say here? I mean, so many athletes have had great careers in their respective sports, but little have done much to carry over that fame into the next life, right? As far as just everyday life, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Foreman was just a big personality, but at the same time, as much as he's a bruiser, he became a beloved figure in America and really worldwide in that sense. So you just do not see that often in boxers and let alone athletes for that much. You know, how many athletes do you know? It's like Shaq. Shaq is a worldwide lovable figure. On the court, he's a bruiser, but he just turned something else post career like that. And I definitely want to just jump on it and give tribute to the legend that George Foreman is. That's it. We really don't have that many legends in boxing left. We really don't. Really don't.
Yeah, I mean, I had word in reference to one other legendary fighter that when they said it, like he wasn't necessarily feeling well or something like that, and that was like the Blade Iran Barkley, of course, who is related to Saquon Barkley, but I just didn't expect this news here in reference to George Foreman, and that just came as a shock because, like y'all said, I mean, he after his professional career became one of the more visible people out there from boxing that has been able to be successful outside of boxing, and so that's why I said he's one of those guys that stands out as one of the more recognizable figures from boxing, particularly from his era, So for him, to transition, that was a big loss here for the sport of boxing. And as Matt mentioned, you talk about being part of that era, even in the '90s, right, where you had the run of course, the video game circuit. Like first, you had the Mike Tyson's Punch Out. You even had like Buster Douglas that had a game. Evander Holyfield, had a game himself too. But George Foreman's KO boxing, like that was like I played it on Super Nintendo or whatnot. So you also had that, and I don't know, man. I might see if I could figure out how to play that game there once again or something. You know what I mean? But that kind of shows how he has been part of pop culture, as they say, or pretty much part of American culture and stuff like that. Not just being in the boxing ring, but outside the boxing ring. So that's one thing that he had, and like I said, in the ring, of course, the number of fights that he had there in notable fights against the Joe Frazier's, against the Ken Dortons, against Muhammad Ali, against Michael Moore, against Evander Holyfield, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and amassed to a record of 76 wins with just 5 losses, and 68 of those 76 wins by way of knockout. One of the highest knockout ratios out there, particularly in the heavyweight division. So that shows how much of a legend he is there within the sport of boxing. So definitely props there to George Foreman on that front, right? And also we had another loss in the sport of boxing, as former WBA lightweight champion Livingstone Bramble transitioned yesterday. He was, like I mentioned, he was able to get himself to be the WBA lightweight champion, right? He had his wins over Ray Mancini, Ray Boom Boom Mancini, as they said, to become the WBA champion, and was able to have a couple of defenses of that title, including a win in the rematch against Ray Mancini back in 1985. And he was able to, continue his professional career. He had another title there in the super lightweight division in his professional career. He fought from 1980 all the way up until 2003, coming from St. Kitts and resided in the British Virgin Islands. He had amassed a record of 40 wins, 26 losses, and 3 draws, with 25 wins by way of knockout. But yes, he had been one of those world champions that did come from St. Kitts, and was the first to win a world title there, hailing from St. Kitts. So also Props to Livingstone Bramble for what he was able to do in his professional career. And like I said, he transitioned yesterday. So rest in power to Livingstone Bramble and rest in power to George Foreman. So that's what I had on that. And I had to, make sure that I had my segment for both of those fighters that were able to contribute to the sport of boxing and also outside of the ring as well. So, that's what I had on that for them. I mean, Brother Terrell, you had just joined on here with us. We got another about 10 minutes or so here before we get to the 2-hour mark. You'll see if you had any reactions to the fights that happened over the course of the weekend, or something in reference to Sebastian Fundora, getting his win, defending his titles, or maybe some on George Kambosos or whatnot. Did you have anything on that?
Yeah, with Fundora, honestly, he's actually getting better. All right. For one, he got in there with Cordell Booker. He did what exactly he's supposed to do. Not he just got hit the guy, and got him out of there. He didn't play around with food, got him out of there. But I think he's really getting better. I still remember about 4 or 5 years ago. I forgot what card he was on. He's an undercard fighter for some main card. That's my first time seeing him. I said, who's this guy? Tall, skinny kid. I said, there's no way he could be at 154, right? He seems so frail, but when we fast forward years later to now, he has confidence. And my best thing I like about him, he fights like a tall man. That reach is just crazy. It's like he just reach across the ring and pop you with a left hand or something like that. But I think he's really grown to a good, confident, strong fighter now. So he's definitely a force to be reckoned with. Of course, we know he has 2 belts. We know that. I mean, my thing for him as far as what's next. So it's kind of funny. There's a whole lot of names at 154. Lubin, who of course I hope to see here coming up real soon.
Yeah.
Hope that he can reemerge too as a title contender in that regard. But I mean, Fundora just makes boxing fun, because you look at the guy. I mean, he just towered over Cordell Booker, towered over him, but he did what he had to do, and I really like him. His confidence is really grown. He's really a good fighter now, not some kind of weird dude. He's a good fighter. So definitely like saying that.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a weird style with Sebastian Fundora. He's been straightforward, and like you said, he's been a lot more refined here at this particular juncture. I mean, I was seeing it there in his bout against Tim Tszyu, where he actually looked like he was a guy that was 6'5.5" with the reach of 80. So he used the jab and kept Tim Tszyu at bay in multiple points of the fight, and that's how he was able to get the favorable decision to win the WBC and WBO super welterweight titles at that front. And being able to get back after almost 12 months to the day and go up against Cordell Booker and look like even sharper against Booker there in that bout, says hey, he really is a force there in the 154-pound division. And so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what could be in the horizon for Sebastian Fundora. As I mentioned, it looks like they're trying to set up a fight between him and Xander Zayas. We're talking about it with Matt earlier. I don't know. I might have to make a couple phone calls or something to see if we could have that be on for, as I said, June 6th over at the Barclays Center or something. You know what I mean? But on one side, they said Zayas is, was waiting for this particular bout, but didn't want to have him return back in June. I might have to push again and say, hey, all right, since we got Sebastian Fundora as the winner here, what about having him fight, him and Zayas fight on June 6th during Puerto Rico Day Parade weekend? I mean, yeah, it won't necessarily be in New York City, but I'm have it over in Brooklyn. They could make that drive over, over the Brooklyn Bridge and make that happen. So I think that would be a very good matchup there at the 154-pound division for those two to battle it out there later this year.
Do you really think Zayas is ready for that?
This question was asked before, and I said at this point, no, I don't. Um, his last bout that he had February 14th at the theater in Madison Square Garden. Um, he had that bout, and me going into that bout, being part of that card, right? I had the expectation that, you know what, it's gonna be something where he's gonna have an easy win, and it's gonna go to full 10 rounds against Slava Spomer. And it was well on its way towards that. And then all of a sudden he gets it to where he overwhelms Spomer and then gets a TKO victory. So yes, he does have a TKO victory there, but to me, I don't know if he has enough put together at this time to have Sebastian Fundora have many issues, especially the Fundora that we saw here against Cordell Booker. Like if he continues to throw that right jab and continue to throw the right jab, whether he's stepping back or trying to go forward with that against Zayas, that's going to be some real trouble for Zayas to deal with early in the bout, and he would have to have something to try to get back to Fundora. And I'm not sure if he has that at this point. But I mean, boxing is the theater of the unexpected. So, hey, did many people expect Brian Mendoza to do what he did against Sebastian Fundora? Not that many, but it still happened. So,
And how many fights? How many fights does Zayas have now?
Zayas is now 21-0.
All right. So, quick comparison. Consider what Zayas has done in his career from prospect to contender. And look at him. Look at what's my man name? Just won the better 135. Keyshawn. Look, compare because I think they came in around the same time, right? If I'm not mistaken, they made their pro debuts.
No, actually, Keyshawn was later than that because like Keyshawn, like what was his pro debut? Like they're in 2021. So Zayas has been in the game longer than that.
Okay, so even with that said, I mean, I'm basically what I'm trying to do here is look what Keyshawn has done, and Keyshawn is exceptional at this point, winning the title, things like that. And I love Zayas because I think at one point I think you had Zayas as the contender, the boxing source contender of the prospect of the year, right? Yeah, I remember that. But and I love Zayas, good come forward style, aggressive, bit defensive minded. But he's a phenomenal contender, right? But title contender, I don't see because we know that's another level. And Fundora has been in some wars at this point. Would it be with Zoo, other people like that? He's been in wars. Yeah. And oh yeah, I can't forget about that one. That's a phenomenal fight with just a back and forth. And those are wars. And those wars breed experience. So Fundora has had good different looks, different opponents, more top level opponents than Zayas has. And on top of that, he has a good work rate too. I'm not sure what his punch output per round is, but it's up there compared to the rest of the division. So I love Zayas. I don't think he's ready for that yet. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, as Dondrick was saying there in the live chat, as far as like Zayas and his, like his power or his technique, like it's not there yet. And after watching a fight on February 14th against Slava Spomer, I said that I was talking with one of the people within Top Rank about Zayas, and this is like from weeks back. And I said, I thought that they were going to build Xander Zayas to be featured in a card, whether it's going to be at the theater at Madison Square Garden or whatever, that they were going to feature him during Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend. Months back, I thought it was going to be something like a Xander Zayas versus a Vito Mielnicki Jr. But with Mielnicki moving up in weight to middleweight, that pretty much was like out of the picture. So I'm still like saying, hey, maybe, y'all could still have an opponent for Xander Zayas, maybe against like who I was saying, like a Charles Conwell or something like that. I mean, for maybe at the time, like an interim title or whatever it was. But they responded and said, no, we're gonna wait it out with Zayas until we see the winner of Fundora versus Booker, right? So now that fight happens. Fundora does his thing, gets the stoppage in the fourth round, and after the fight, you had Xander Zayas there at the Mandalay Bay Event Center, and he was able to step in the ring and chop it up with Sebastian Fundora. So it almost seems like all roads lead to that fight happening next. But yeah, it's like I don't know, like at this particular juncture of Xander Zayas' career, even at him being at 21-0, he's there at 22 years old. But like the fights that he's had, like even in his bout against Patrick Teixeira, who's a former WBO champion at super welterweight, that isn't necessarily enough to me that says, okay, he's ready to face guys that are around the top part of the super welterweight division. Like all of the guys that we've seen there at super welterweight are pretty much around, the TGB or PBC banner or whatnot. Like we've seen the Lubins, we've seen, the Jesus Ramos Juniors. We see, a Sebastian Fundora. We see like IBF champion Bakum Murtazalia. We see even outside of that group, we see Virgil Ortiz Jr. Even we see like Sergey Boychuk. We see these guys and we're like saying, those guys at least have some type of element in their game that says that they could really contend for a world title shot or a world championship or be around there. With Xander Zayas, I haven't quite seen that yet, or at least I haven't seen it recently in his past few fights. And I've been, I was there for the Slaus Spomer fight and the Damian Sosa fight that he had. And even back, I might have made that fight that he had against Ronald Cruz, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, a number of them have been like, No, actually, it was the Alexis Flores. I was there for his bout against Alexis Flores back in 2022. But other than that, like I don't see what fight out there stands out that says that, okay, Xander Zayas is ready to compete against a number of those other contenders at 154 pounds. Not just the champion. I'm saying the contenders there at 154 pounds that are out there. So I don't know. Yeah, that one's you know what I mean?
That's a great point because even with comparison to Keyshawn, we could see his progression about 3-4 fights ago. It's like this guy might be ready.
Yeah.
Of course. So you could easily see that in his progression. So definitely not the same for Zayas. Not saying he's not good. He's just not ready for that level yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said.
With Keyshawn Davis, like when we've seen him against Miguel Madueño, when we've seen him against Gustavo Lemos, when we've seen him, against Jose Pedraza, those were the three fights that he had last year that built him to the point where, okay, we could take a chance on him and be fairly confident that he could win a world title. And, with the situation being that Dennis Berinchik was there as a WBO champion, they said, okay, this is the route that we're going to go with Keyshawn Davis. If he gets it, he gets it. If he doesn't, then we could do what we can in order to build him back up. But we just feel fairly confident that he's able to take care of business there against the Dennis Berinchik, right? Here with Xander Zayas, are you really going to have him go up against like a Sebastian Fundora like that where, yeah, I don't know, I'm looking at like a groups thing, not necessarily a Ring Magazine, but I'm going to the Transnational Boxing Rankings Board here real quick, and I'm seeing their like top 10 and who they have as like the top guys there within the division, and Xander Zayas is not in the top 10 there. We have like a Bakum Murtazalia, Fundora, Virgil Ortiz, Boachuk, Jesus Ramos, Tim Zhu, even Yoenis Tejas, right? Like, who in that list do you feel like Xander Zayas could go in that ring and be able to execute what he has to execute in order to get the win? That's the thing that, people would have to say for Xander Zayas in order for him to be like seriously considered as a world title contender. So that's the thing you got to look at with Xander Zayas in this potential matchup against Sebastian Fundora there.
Yeah, definitely. So I
Yep.
mean, it just makes no sense to put him into a position where he's probably going to lose that and lose his undefeated record. I mean, yeah, I know one loss does not derail your career. We know that. We said it so many
Mhm.
times on the show, but
Mhm.
he's just not ready yet. He's not ready yet.
Right. But also, you might have this other situation that was, mentioned earlier by Matt with Xander Zayas being involved with Top Rank and Top Rank having the deal with ESPN, the current deal with ESPN close to expiring. What are they going to do after that? Like we haven't seen any reports of anything being solidified next. If they're going to, redo the deal or if they're looking at, looking elsewhere. So, with that being said, okay, what are they going to do with the fighters that they currently have right now? So and he's like one of them. They had a Shakur Stevenson, and that kind of fell through. They have Keyshawn Davis, and they have plans for Keyshawn Davis, but after his next bout that they're in the works for, after that, okay, what are they going to do? So we got to see like how Top Rank is going to maneuver after this month, April, May, and then see what happens in June. And then after that, who knows what Top Rank does from that point. I mean, I'd probably ask around, but at least as of right now, it's pretty much up in the air for that. That's what I had here as far as like, just a little bit over 2 hours here for this particular podcast and things like that. Anything else from y'all as far as like what went down over this weekend or anything else in the boxing scene?
No, I did catch that too about the Top Ranks, ESPN's contract coming up and everything. And there's like I said, no news, no new news in that regard of that being renewed. So that's very interesting. As we know, ESPN is one of our major, really our only constant major publisher of boxing content right now. Because Amazon is just we know they're in the game. They got one foot in, one foot out in that regard. So we kind of depend on ESPN to provide us with a steady stream of matches when they come forward. So if they go away, that's a good question. That's going to leave a hole in boxing for right now. So definitely looking forward to some news coming out for that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, it's a lot of activity that's going on in boxing. And for me, the schedule is about to pick up. We got fights that's coming up next weekend. I'll be talking about that in the midweek report. That's going to be over in Mexico and Las Vegas. You're going to have that rematch that's going to involve Tevin Farmer there against William Zepeda. And you're going to have the rematch with Sandy Ryan against Michaela Mayer that's headlining there at the Fontainebleau in Las Vegas. And you're going to have Brian Norman Jr. defending the WBO welterweight title on that card there in Las Vegas as well. So against Derek Cuevas. So there's a lot that's going to be going on for the following week. And then April 5th, there's going to be fights. April 12th is going to be absolutely insane for boxing. Maybe I'm not sure about April 19th. April 26th has a big event that's coming up over in the UK, and then the following week after that is the first weekend of May, where you have 3 fight cards, at least 3 fight cards, 1 fight card each day. They're involving, the thing there with Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, and Teofimo all in 1 card over at Times Square. And the following day, you got Canelo Alvarez versus William Skull over in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And then on the Sunday in Las Vegas, you're going to have Naoya Inoue defending his undisputed super bantamweight title. So that tells you how much activity is going on week after week after week. And even in the following week, like I was mentioning before, you're going to have Erickson Lubin there against he's going to be there against Arturo Holmes on a Pro Box card. So it's going to be insane for boxing. Like, y'all folks can't say boxing is dead when we got all of these events back to back to back. That's the thing that we got, right? So there's that, man. But big thanks for everyone that's been able to listen in here live. If you can, hit the like button here if you were watching live on on YouTube or on Rumble. You can also show support if you're listening to the replay on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Amazon Podcasts. Hit like button or show your support on that. But we'll be right back at it here with the midweek report on Wednesday night. Like I said, we're going to have a guest on for the midweek report there. Working on having a guest on for either Tuesday or Thursday, right? So also definitely working on that as well. And as I say, we have the Boxing Source podcast for Sundays there. So you just check us out live each and every Sunday. Either through YouTube or Rumble. Was trying to work on having another avenue to provide this live podcast for, but at least for now, that didn't necessarily work out. But there's that. Like I said, share if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the Boxing Source YouTube channel. Really appreciate it here. All right, Terrell, what you got?
Do you have any contact with anybody from Keith Urban's camp at all?
No, actually, I don't, which is pretty crazy there. I should, but I don't, and I'll try to see if there's like another avenue. But actually, I might see if I could get in contact with somebody that might have another method to get in touch with Keith Thurman. Because I know that I made a post on X in reference to like if there's anybody within the sport of boxing that y'all want me to have on to interview and things like that. Yeah, it was mentioned like Keith Thurman. So we'll see if we can work on having Keith Thurman on here on the Boxing Source. So we'll see.
What's my guy name? He came on the show a few times. Don't he know Keith Thurman? Oh
my God, Tip Bayless?
No, the former boxer champion. I'm tripping. Nate, don't he know him?
I'll check. Actually, that reminds me of something. I'll hit up Nate. And see what he says. Because
I think Keith would actually show some favor, considering that we're connected right here to the 813 St. Pete area. Mm-hmm. I would like to think that.
Yeah. So I would want to see if we could work on getting Keith Thurman on here on this podcast, or having on an interview. But I want to have him on the podcast so that you'll have all of us here available to talk with them and ask them questions and things like that. So we'll see if we could work on that as well there for the Boxing Source YouTube channel. But for this edition,
can I ask a question?
All right, we got one more.
I'm sorry. I'm derailing us, but Terrell, you want to make this bet on public TV to where you can't skip out on it when I win? Or you just want to wait till we get off? What do you want to do, Terrell?
We'll talk offline, man. We'll get it sorted out. We'll sort it out.
JR got to be a part of the conversation.
Right. Well, yeah.
And just know I pay my bets.
All right, a Lannister pays his dues, his debts.
You know what? We're not gonna do this tonight. We're not gonna do this.
All right, no more from me, JR. No more from me.
With that being said, that is the end of this particular episode of the Boxing Source podcast. All right. We will catch y'all later, y'all. Thanks again. Peace out.